So the Season of Dawn is about to end, and with it, a new season called Season of the Worthy will be ushered in on March the 10th. Now, I've collaborated with a few people to collect all the things that you're going to want to do before the next season kicks off. Things that will make life a bit easier in the long run, especially considering that Armour 2.0 is going to be revamped next season. Now, understand, you don't have to do any of these things. These are simply suggestions. Now, before we get into this list, these are all the items that will no longer be available to players after Season of Dawn ends. Just wanted to throw the list up before we get into it, just in case you want to briefly look over this. But without further ado, let's get started. So first up, I would highly advise obtaining all the seasonal mods for Season of Dawn. Now, I know Bungie in a few twabs ago did announce the mod socket changes that are coming. They stated right here, we also received a lot of suggestions on how to improve seasonal mods. So starting next season, the seasonal armor mod socket, so for example, Undying mods and Dawn mods, will also be able to use mods released during the seasons before and after the armor pieces were released. For example, Armour with the mod socket from Season of Dawn can now equip Dawn mods, Undying mods from Season of Undying, and Redacted mods from Season of Redacted. So this is actually a double whammy. Not only is it going to give you value to the armor pieces that you carry over into the future, but this is also going to give value to just the mods in general. So if you have not completed the obelisk, I highly advise doing those things, as pretty much all the mods there are extremely important, and you can only get them as of right now over the next week and a half. Mods like High Energy Fire, Protective Light, Quick Charge, Striking Light, Heavy Handed, all of these mods are extremely important. And for my hunter mains out there, or pretty much anyone in general, Powerful Friends is a fantastic mod for reaching that max cap in recovery, mobility, and even something like resilience. Yes, it is possible to get 100 in all of those stat categories with something like Powerful Friends. Not going to dive into it today, as we've already went over this, but just know, before this season is over with, please guys, get these seasonal mods. That one little change that Bungie has made to seasonal mods and the activity mod slot is going to allow for more long-term value outside of what we used to have, which was just value within that given season. Now moving on, now that we mentioned the seasonal mods, let's talk about the highest stat armor pieces and why you want to keep them. Currently right now, when you get a piece of armor, you're probably like me, you look at it and you see its elemental affinity, and then you think to yourself, it's not void or solar or arc, especially if you're hunting for a very specific piece of armor. Next season though, armor affinity will actually be able to be swapped, thus allowing for that high stat armor piece that you have to now match whatever build it is that you're trying to spec out for. So I highly advise guys, whatever high stat armor pieces you have, and I know we're getting pretty low on vault space, or I figure you guys are. I'm always low. I feel like every time I turn around, my vault space is maxed out. But if you have those high stat armor pieces, don't scrap them just because it doesn't match the elemental affinity that you're looking for, as next season you'll be able to change that. Which takes us to the third thing you need to be doing, obtaining upgrade modules. So it was confirmed in the TWAB that in order to swap the elemental affinity of your armor pieces, you'll need to consume one upgrade module to do so. Now there's multiple ways to get upgrade modules, but I'll say they're pretty rare. One way is to do the weekly gunsmith bounties. These actually give you a number of experience as well as some upgrade modules. Now granted, that's pretty limited, which actually takes us to the more efficient way to get upgrade modules. In the Eververse store, you can actually purchase a consumable called Concentrated Matter Gem. Am I saying that right? Regardless, it costs 200 bright dust. Now each one of these gives a chance that bosses, upon defeating, will drop an upgrade module. It also states that the effect will last until an upgrade module is found, and only one concentrated matter gem can be active at a time. This is extremely important, guys. I was always broke when it came to upgrade modules. Now, granted, next season we'll have a new season pass, and normally the lower levels of the season pass offer a ton of upgrade modules. But if you're like me, you burned to that pretty quickly. On top of that, considering that trials will be power enabled, having your best gear completely upgraded to whatever the cap is going to be is extremely important. So not only are you going to be using upgrade modules to obviously upgrade whatever your favorite weapons and armor pieces are, but getting those armor pieces to those right elemental affinities is also going to be very important. Now those are like the absolute must things that you need to do before next season. Now we're going to move into the things that are kind of more optional, but to me they're still very important. So next on the list, obtain god rolls for weapons from Season of Dawn. Now I actually did a weapon roll guide on all of the weapons. Some of this has changed because again, this is like an overview when the season initially launches. I've then proceeded to actually review many of these weapons individually. Some of the weapons I would highly advise getting before the season's over with. Steel Feather Feather Repeater, which is going to get a buff next season. Trophy Hunter, which is not going to get a buff, but it comes with a weapon perk Vorpal Weapon, which allows it to do more damage against bosses. Highly advise getting that one. Marty. Marty is a grenade launcher, a fantastic weapon, and super unique. It's sad that not many people use it, but Martyr's Retribution with the right roll is a fantastic option for my grenade launcher enthusiasts. And then, of course, you've got other weapons like Breach Light, Patron of Lost Causes, and those aren't the only valuable ones, but for my playstyle, those were like the ones I went after first. And then everything else was kind of like, all right, if I have enough Fractaline available, then I'll go after them. But those are the big ones to me, guys, and I highly advise, as these weapons will not be able to be obtained next season. And I don't know what the duration there is. It may actually be like, what, 2-3 seasons before they go back in rotation? Regardless, though, considering that Fractaline is so readily available for people that have completed the Obelisk, there's no better time to obtain God rolls for each and every one of these weapons. Now, that's not to say roll drops won't still be available next season. These are simply the Season of Dawn weapons. So weapons like Last Hope, Uriel's Gift, Alantha, if I'm saying that right, those weapons will still be present even next season as they are roll drops. But the Season of Dawn weapons, they will not. So again, highly advise you figure out what it is, which roll you want, and go after it. Moving on, next thing on the list, finding a well-rolled sword. Now, we did a complete sword guide, going over the best swords, or most likely the best swords next season. Again, we really don't know what the best sword's gonna be, as swords are getting a huge rework completely. So all I can offer you is this. The best swords currently in the game are, of course, the Heroic Menagerie swords, especially for my hunters. Gold Tusk is a fantastic option. We went over God rolls before, but it can roll with things like Surrounded. Plus, it's such a fast attack sword that it's got great DPS. Another sword for my Titan mains, Throne Cleaver, with something like counterattack. And then, if you don't want to do Heroic Menagerie, because I know that actually requires a fire team, you could still at least get a sword from Black Armory. That's an easily farmable sword. Striker's Sure Hand is still an excellent option. Now, it's still not my favorite option. I definitely would rank all the Heroic Menagerie swords over it, but it's definitely still a contender. On top of that, it's probably easier to farm for. I will say though, Heroic Menagerie is nowhere near as hard as it was last summer, considering that most of us were under leveled last summer, and I think we were at what, a base default of -10 power in comparison to the activity. So it was always going to be difficult for us in Season of Opulence. But power level has greatly progressed since then, which kind of made Heroic Menagerie somewhat of a joke. On top of that, Heroic Menagerie, you can still go after a number of God roll weapons just from the Menagerie chest. So it's kind of like a double whammy. You get a chance of getting a very good sword that will start you off right next season, and it almost seems like Bungie's trying to maneuver us to use swords more next season. On top of that, if you're like me and you're still farming for that God roll Waken Vigil, boom, 2 birds, 1 stone. Now, speaking of obtaining those swords in Heroic Menagerie, another thing that is very beneficial from doing Menagerie, and something that's probably going to be important even next season, is having the Hive mods. Now, I don't have any confirmation on this, but it's speculated that next season is going to revolve around the Hive. I know we've seen like some War Mod themes here and there. Having those Hive mods, things like Hive Armaments, which are extremely beneficial as it grants you heavy ammo on grenade kills against the Hive, Hive Invigoration, Hive Repurposing. I would say out of all of these mods, obviously, our armament mods are by far the most valuable. Now, I don't really know all the ways you can obtain these Hive armament mods, or just these Hive themed mods to begin with. For right now, though, I think the best and easiest way to obtain them is you have the greatest chance of getting a Hive-based mod on your first Heroic Menagerie run per character. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong there, but essentially, if you do 3 Heroic Menagerie runs each week across all 3 of your characters, you should at least get one of those mods. It's supposed to be a very high chance. And again, any armor piece from either the Menagerie, Crown of Sorrow, or any Leviathan-based raid can slot these armor mods. And I know we're going to have new armor, new activity mods. I'm sure some of us are still going to be speccing out for that Charge of Light. But even if you had just one piece of armor with a single Hive armament mod on it, amongst whatever build it is that you're rocking, having that extra bit of heavy can go a long way for you. So I highly advise locking down those Hive mods while going for those swords and whatever loot inside of Menagerie. Now moving on, for my Titan mains out there, locking down a good pair of Stronghold Gauntlets is going to be extremely important. As Bungie announced a few twabs ago that the Stronghold Gauntlets are actually going to be modified to allow Titans a unique guarding experience. And again, guarding in general is going to completely change and become way more valuable for our swords. Now, Stronghold currently right now comes with the exotic perk Clenched Fist. Guarding with swords increases move speed and does not drain ammo. Shocks blocked immediately after guarding also heal you. Actually, very good gauntlets. I love pairing them with things like Black Talon, especially Black Talon and the exotic Catalyst, as everything just synergizes perfectly here. Bungie's not hanging Strongholds out to dry though with the new upcoming sword changes. I would assume that Strongholds are going to have another effect to them outside of what's stated here in the exotic perk to go along with the future guard changes. So if you don't have some Stronghold gauntlets, guys, I highly advise visiting Ozer this weekend and next and pop that Faded Ingram on your Titan class. Now moving on to the final thing, and this is of course for the people that are just trying to get a head start next season, but completely up to you. Saving bounties. Now I actually never do this. This is the first season that I'm like, all right, I'm gonna save some bounties. We're gonna be legit about it. And I've saved up quite a bit on all 3 of my characters. And you can max out all your bounties. And these bounties will still be present next season. Now the bounties that are not gonna be present are of course your Obelisk related bounties, your Time Lost weapon bounties, and your Saint 14 bounties, which don't necessarily give you experience. The whole reason why you're trying to save up bounties is to grant yourself experience at the beginning of next season so that you can get far up into that new season pass, but simultaneously to unlock that artifact as quickly as possible, which is probably the bigger thing, at least for me. Now, there's multiple ways to increase the amount of experience you can get. You can have a Ghost Shell on with perks like Guiding Light, which actually gives you a flat 10% buff there in experience gain. Simultaneously, though, as you gain more and more experience, you'll of course unlock things in your season pass, which increases the amount of experience for you and your fire team, which is why it's often suggested that when you turn in bounties, you're with a fire team, or at least that's what's been suggested to me. Again, I'm kind of new to all this. I normally don't save the whole bounties and do all that, but I want to have access to artifact mods as well as season pass related stuff before Trials drops on the 13th, which means we only have 3 days there from March 10th to the 13th to rack up on experience. So saving up these bounties will give you a leg up. And again, the bounties that grant you the most experience, I believe, are the weekly bounties. And then you can follow that up with pretty much any of your other bounties, and then your purchasable bounties that cost like 3,000 Glimmer per also grant you experience. So guys, that is our prep guide for next season. Let me know in the comments below if we left anything off. Again, you got a week and a half to fulfill all these things, so good luck to you. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.